sometimes it's the anticipation of eating something that gets us more than the actual event itself.
Yes.
And again, that's okay, but it's important to remember sometimes we don't actually want the food. It's the experience of eating the food, or it's what we think we remember from eating the food.
Hello, Adam. Great as always to be here with you. And, you know, we're still in it. We're still in the season, still in the training room. And there's a heated debate in my house about whether or not you should wrap gifts you're giving out for the holidays. Do you guys debate this?
No debate. Gotta wrap them. Gotta wrap them.
Right? And why is that? Tell me. You tell me.
It is all about the anticipation.
That's the best part, right? Like you come in, if you celebrate Christmas, or maybe you celebrate Hanukkah or some other gift-giving holiday at this time, right? But there is nothing better than coming in the house and seeing little gifts wrapped in paper. And all these ideas come, what could it be? What could it be, right? And that anticipation, oh man, it is so yummy. And that is the reason to wrap gifts. I 100% agree. I am clearly in the camp of wrapping gifts, and I do it. So today I wanted to really talk about anticipation, but I kind of went down this, rabbit hole of research. Of course, dopamine came up. We don't need any more podcasts on dopamine at this point in time. And I came across this post from 2011 from one of my body tutor's biggest fans, Gretchen Rubin. And it is such a gem. I'm sure you've read it, Adam, because I know you're buddies with her. You guys go way back. But she was telling a story about how her daughter was super excited, like jumping for joy, that her birthday party was going to happen in class the next day. And Gretchen breaks down what she calls the 4 stages of enjoyment. And it just hits the nail on the head. And I think it's so applicable to the work that we do. So here they are. Guess what number 1 is, though?
Anticipation, baby.
Ooh, I would say if it's a pie, anticipation is half of it. Right? And then the other 3 got to split it. But the other 3 are just as crucial, and we'll talk about why. So the first one, yes, anticipation. The second one, savoring. The third one, expression. Express it, right? Like that was one of the things she talked about in the blog post. Her daughter was expressing her excitement, and she just got so giddy over it. And the last thing, reflection, right? So let's break this down. I know you in particular have a soft spot for anticipation. So talk to us about it and talk to us about how you think it applies to the work that we do.
Yes, I love anticipation. I think it is such a powerful feeling and a powerful strategy. So the easiest way to put it is if someone asks me to go to my favorite restaurant tonight or next week, as much as I want to go tonight, I will always choose at a later date because this way I get to anticipate going and I get to experience it at a later time. So I'd much rather enjoy the anticipation for longer, right? One of the best parts about going on vacation sometimes is talking about it for months in advance and saying, oh, what are we gonna do here? What are we gonna do there? And just the daydreaming and dreaming about it. So for me, it's always, how can I use anticipation as a strategy? Let's say I'm craving something. I really want this chocolate chip cookie from a local place that's amazing. Sure, I can give in and go for it now. But what if I said, you know what? I can enjoy it in a week from now. And this way I get to look forward to it. And of course, I get to still enjoy it.
I like it. So you're really kind of building up the enjoyment factor by allowing more time for anticipation.
Yes. So just a quick thing, it's not a debate, but, there's a debate between, do we surprise the kids with fun things or do we let them know ahead of time? And the downside of surprising them with things, of course, is there is no anticipation. So it's a constant battle where it's like, it would be fun to surprise them with things, but it's also like, for example, we recently went to the Knicks game. We've been talking about that for months, right? And they've been looking forward to that for months. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think it builds, it builds the delayed gratification muscle. It allows you to look forward to it. So, I would always err on the side of, you know what, let them know and let them look forward to it.
I like it, but I think you're right. Sometimes a surprise is nice. And I do think there's room for that in this construct. It
Totally.
would remove anticipation, which, maybe that's sometimes optional. I don't know, but anticipation is a pretty great feeling. Now, okay, there's this side of it though. Sometimes we really build something up, right? Like we're really looking forward to it, we're really anticipating it, and the thing happens, and what? What? It's like, oh, wasn't quite what I was anticipating. Has that happened to you?
Of course, all the time. The event is not nearly as fun or as exciting as we think it's going to be. Absolutely.
Right. And I'm not bringing this up to like blow a hole in anticipation. I still think, and it is, right? Like aside from whatever experience comes after it, anticipation is a wonderful feeling. And I think if we're talking training, right? Training room skills to build, learning to build anticipation into our lives is a really good one.
Totally.
But I think I'm bringing that up really to talk about the next 3 stages, right? And so this is going to slot in for those spontaneous times, and then also for times where maybe the event isn't quite what we expected, but also when it is. So let's move on and talk about savoring. Do you want to take the lead on this?
Sure. I mean, I think, when it comes to food, for example, I think a lot of us daydream about our favorite foods, and then when we're actually eating it, we're kind of just shoveling into our mouths. And I think it's really important, and if we're going to continue with the food example, when you're eating your favorite food, really savor the flavor, right? Act as if you're a food critic, right? Appreciate the taste, the texture, the smell, the ambiance, everything, right? And I think so often we're just shoveling into our mouths because we're so used to doing that. We're so busy. We're going a million miles a minute. We don't have time to really savor the flavor. So I think it's really important that we remember to slow down, appreciate it, pretend you're a food critic, and really enjoy the experience of eating.
Yes, absolutely. And this video is so timely. I just had a call with a client and I just want to celebrate this win right here, right now, because she's just doing phenomenal work, first of all. But she had this very thing happen, right? In her mind, earlier in the day, she was like, I'm going to get my favorite Starbucks holiday latte. Like she was building anticipation. Yay, skill number 1. And then like life happened and she's running errands and she's stressed and she's crazy and she gets out of the house and she realizes, whoa, I haven't eaten anything. And she happens to be in a Target where we all know there's a Starbucks. And she tells me that she goes in and she buys herself a breakfast sandwich and a plain latte. And she was like, I didn't even get my holiday latte. And I was like, well, that's a huge win because you wouldn't have enjoyed it running around like a mad person in Target. And she goes, no, you're absolutely right. I wouldn't have. I mean, that was such a great, she knew she couldn't savor it, right? So she passed on that. She built the anticipation and now there's more anticipation, right? Like she gets to ride that anticipation again, but she couldn't savor it. And savoring is so key. And I think it's important too with like spontaneous things, right? Like if somebody surprises you, oh my gosh, like how present are you to that surprise? Like you're, blindsided and everything is just totally new to you. You can't help but savor it. So it's such a key part of enjoyment. Absolutely.
Yeah. Can I just mention one thing?
Sure.
It brings to mind also the idea of, oh my God, I totally just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. Sorry.
Excellent. It did bring to mind and then it went. So we'll move on. And then you just interrupt me when more savoring ideas come to your mind. So expression, which listen, some people might give a little pushback on this, but I tell clients all the time, say it out loud and make the most of it when you do, right? Because I think it makes it real. Have you ever had the experience where you have things going on in your head, but you need to say something out loud to somebody to make sure like either A, I'm not losing my mind, or B, this is real, right? Like ground me and center me. And I think expression of what you're experiencing to somebody else and with somebody else makes it that much more real, really beholdens it and beholdens you to that moment.
Absolutely. And, it's one of the things, so one of our favorite things to do as a family is try different pizza places. and we try to try the best of the best. And as we're eating it, like we'll kind of talk about our ratings, and we'll really just like really appreciate it, and we'll express how we're feeling, express what we think. And like my kids laugh because they're always like, you always feel like it always sounds like every pizza is great, but I do think it's important to express how you're feeling, and that is part of the enjoyment of it. And I think the tricky part, though, is everyone shares their appreciation or shares their gratitude or whatever you want to call it in different ways.
Sure.
But I do think cultivating that skill as well for other people and yourself, is really important.
Yeah, a fun practice is, and I do this, it's kind of nerdy. You talk about doing it for yourself, right? But like things that I take pleasure in food wise that I might not normally spend a lot of time on, sometimes I'll slow it way down and I'm like, all right, like let's really think about what this tastes like and why do you enjoy it so much and what's going on around you, right? Like it sounds silly, but it is very meditative and it brings you right into the present. And then you either deepen your appreciation for it, or sometimes you realize that thing you think you enjoy, you don't really enjoy all that much. That happens. Does that happen to you?
Absolutely. So one of the things I've learned, and I help clients remember this as well, is that sometimes it's the anticipation of eating something that gets us more than the actual event itself.
Yes.
And again, that's okay. But it's important to remember, sometimes we don't actually want the food. It's the experience of eating the food, or it's what we think we remember from eating the food.
Yes. I actually had a client who successfully overcame eating to deal with her cravings. And I know this sounds like a superpower. I wish I could bottle it and pass it out to everybody. But she would just imagine eating the food, and it became enough for her. Right? Like she could understand how it was working in her brain, that she thought that food was just so amazing, and she would savor the thoughts of it enough that she didn't ever need to actually experience the food because she understood like it was kind of getting in the way of achieving what she wanted to achieve. Anyway, I just thought I'd put it
I
out
love
there.
that.
Yeah.
It actually reminded me of what I was going to say earlier.
Very good.
Yes. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So there's things, called open loops and closed loops, right? So an open loop is, you want to complete a task and then you're unable to complete it because there's something that is beyond your control. You're unable to do it, and it's in your mind, it's in your brain, right? It's this open loop. Whereas a closed loop is you set out to take out the garbage, you take out the garbage, it's done, it's a closed loop. And open loops can be very they can wear us down, right? We think about them, they take up brain power, and open loops can be tricky. And one of the things I always recommend is if you have open loops, write them down. I really believe our mind is designed to think of new things, not the same thing over and over. And it sounds like what your client did with the coffee, with the drink, is instead of saying no, she said essentially to herself later. And sometimes telling yourself later, yes, I'm not going to have this now, but I can have it later. And if you do that with kids too, right? There's like that really helps because it takes it out of no, and it's all right, later we can have it. And in that way, you have this open loop that can actually serve you and help you for food. So just a thought.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to have to think on that more. That's interesting. Also, like, no gives you something to rebel against.
Exactly. Right? So like in this case, I think typically open loops wear us down, but I think open loops with food can actually help us. Because if you just tell yourself no, or, I'd much prefer you say, I choose not to, or I don't want to. But
Right.
sometimes even that, you might not like how that feels. If you say, you know what, all right, fine, later or next week or tomorrow, that could be a lot more palatable.
Yep, definitely. Or in 5 minutes, right? We can work with even small moments of
Absolutely.
not just yet. Not just yet.
Exactly.
Cool. Good note. Work with those open loops. Delay them. That's what we're really talking about anyway.
Yes.
All right, so let's move on. Stage number 4, reflection, right? And this, memories come from this, right? We all love a good memory. In fact, memories build anticipation, right? Like if you remember your favorite holiday treat from last year, you've probably been anticipating it for months.
Yep.
So don't abandon stage 4 where you reflect upon the experience. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is more perhaps a philosophical question, but when you're with your kids or you're doing fun things, are you a picture taker or are you more of an IRL, let it just play out? I'm going to just live it out in real life.
Yeah, I'm an IRL. And sometimes I feel guilty because I didn't get a picture. Like my daughter this weekend had her show and she was like, "Did you take the pictures of the show?" And I was like, "No, I didn't. I just wanted to be there and not deal with my phone and figure out when I was supposed to take the picture. I was present."
Yeah. It's tricky because I find myself, I'm always erring on the side of take the picture, take the
Mm,
video. And I try to be present, but obviously I'm not fully present if I'm worried about my phone.
yeah.
But to me, like capturing memories, like I'm all about that. And sometimes it comes at the expense of, I guess, being fully present. It's like, you go to a concert and, you watch a concert online sometimes, or if you go to a concert, the biggest joke is like, oh, everyone's on their phone. What's the point? But I do think these people are having such a wonderful time. They're so in the moment that they want to try to capture it. And I certainly understand it. But I think the idea of, capturing memories helps, and it also helps to talk about them, which again perpetuates anticipation and it becomes this virtuous cycle.
Yeah. I think don't dismiss the power of the mind though. And honestly, like I get what you're saying, right? But let me think about it this way. I did, by the way, capture a couple pictures in the second show because I got the "you didn't" in the first show. But you know, I might look at those and they only capture a second. They
Hmm.
only capture one brief moment of that experience. And it's all the other things that come flooding back, right? So even in that case, like a picture doesn't capture the entire memory for me. It can be a good trigger, right? So take a picture and then put
Exactly.
the phone
Yep.
away, right? Like we don't need to capture every second in photographs because I think the brain does really nice things with memories. Generally, especially if it's enjoyable. So,
I totally. I agree. For me, I try to. I certainly capture pictures, but I also use it more as a trigger, right? Because I
mhm.
don't want to forget it. And I think for me at least, I feel like I can forget the event. And if I have a picture or two, then once I see the picture, it's like, oh, I remember this, and that all comes back. An alternative to that, of course, is you have a 1 or 2 sentence journal where each day
Mm,
you do something fun, you jot down, what you did. But yes, whatever it takes to trigger the memory.
right. Create a trigger within your reflection. All right. Anything else we need to say before we kind of wrap it up and remind everybody what the 4 stages of enjoyment are?
I think the most effective part of enjoyment is anticipation. And my challenge to you, because I know we all like challenges, is how can you build anticipation into this training season? How can you use it to serve you and benefit you? So think about that. I also think we touched upon earlier before we started the video about preparing for after the event, right?
Mm,
So I know something for me when I was a kid, I used to struggle with this all the time, where I would look forward to an event so much it would happen. And then I felt like I would be in such a funk. I'd feel so sad that it was over. So one thing I learned, just, I don't like the word secret, but I think one quote unquote secret to happiness is always having things to look forward to. I think that's just a helpful thing in general. But also preparing for how you're going to handle after the event. Can you touch on that a little bit, Haley?
yeah, I think using some of these steps can be helpful, right? Like that's where the reflection piece can be really helpful because I think what happens sometimes, like I remember growing up, oh my God. I don't know if you had this experience. Um, but I would not be able to sleep Christmas Eve. I mean, until I was in college, I would just lay awake in my bed at night, and I knew everything, but I just was so excited with anticipation. And I remember my mom always telling me, like, "Oh, I just feel so depressed now it's over." Like we'd go through the mania of opening all the gifts and the music and the this and the that, and then it was done,
Yep.
right? And everybody was just kind of down. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think really grabbing hold of the reflection time and really like practicing, actually just practicing all 3 of those, savoring. You've got to be there. You've got to
Mm-hmm.
try to slow it down, because anticipation, I will say, anticipation kind of creates this momentum that if you're not really careful of when the event arrives, you're going to miss it, right? Like
I agree.
I didn't have a huge wedding, but I have heard countless stories of brides and grooms who are like, I have no idea what happened at my wedding. Like,
Yep.
I don't even know if I ate. I'm not sure who I talked to. I don't remember it. Oh my gosh. Months and months, and all the money and all the energy and all the time spent creating this event to not remember it, and it's understandable. It's a lot going on. But I think we have to be careful of anticipation. While it's wonderful and it feels amazing, it creates momentum depending on how long you've been anticipating, right? So then it's on us to say, okay, like, let me make sure I'm present as best I can. And then touch people, talk to people in your immediate surrounding area, right? And I think what all those other stages do, Adam, is it kind of slows us down on the come down, right? And then you've got time to reflect, you've got time to make memories. And I think that's what kind of covers us until the next thing to look forward to. What do you think?
I agree. Two things. One quick thing for anyone who has not gotten married yet and wants to get married. One of the best tips, or the best tip I got before me and my wife got married, was stay together as much as you can during the wedding, because it goes by in a blur. And if you both are together, then you can kind of piece together the day or night, right? Like you just, because I think a lot of times, the bride is here, the groom is there, whatever, you guys are split up, and it's like you guys have different memories. If you're together, you have the same memory and you can kind of talk about it and piece it together, which is, for me, I love that tip. But the other thing, going back to, really this whole enjoyment process, is one thing that's helped me a lot is just accepting that you can't really have highs without lows. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. If I want to enjoy the highs, I have to be prepared for the low. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be a low. It's all how I look at it, right? So that's really helped me, though, is, you can't have the weekend without the week. You can't have like good without bad. You can't appreciate good food without bad food. Like you need that contrast. So I just try to accept that this is part of it. And if we want to have the highs, there's going to be a natural just come down, and that's okay.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, just look at the body systems, right? Like, let's look at the happiness chemical dopamine, right? Depending on how high it gets, we know what's coming on the other side, right? A come down. And generally, again, if it was a really high peak, there's a crash. And yeah, we got to be prepared for it, right? The higher we go, it's going to be something on the other side. But I think, you're right. You just have to embrace that as part of it, right? Kind of these peaks and valleys. And we have strategies to help you through the valleys.
Right. And that's obviously, and one of the many reasons why I'm such a big proponent of just having, prioritizing the fundamental things like your nutrition, like your exercise, like your sleep, because they really do help you handle the everyday peaks and valleys. They help you handle and deal with everything better, including just, peaks and valleys of life. So, I just, I find that I'm much more able to deal with those types of things when I'm consistent with my routine versus, let's say one of the things I started doing, a few years ago was during vacations, I'm exercising, right? I'm taking care of myself. But if I was not exercising, not, doing what I normally do, I think sometimes those valleys would get to me more. Because I do think when you take care of yourself, you just enables you to handle everything better. So
100%. All right, gang. Well, that's what we have for you. The 4 stages of enjoyment. And we'd love to hear about how they go for you. And I think unless Adam has anything else to add. Nope. Okay.
The only thing I have, I want to hear how you're going to use the strategy of anticipation in this training season, right?
Yes.
So how are you going to use that? Let us know. And we always love hearing from you. And we will talk to you guys soon.
Yep. Take good care. See you next time.